Hey there, Internet. My name's Luxander, and I'm here to help you out of a jam. I'm going to explain today what you can do after you've accidentally misgendered someone. I want to quickly thank Wellington Marcus, who is one of my patrons, who actually suggested this topic over on Patreon. Misgendering is a word that means you gendered someone wrong. You looked at them, you saw them as a particular gender, you addressed them that way, and it turns out that that wasn't actually true for that person, and so you've made a mistake in how you've identified them. The simple explanation, usually the primary thing that happens is that the wrong pronoun gets used, but this can also mean that you've used the wrong gendered noun, like you've said ma'am or sir in a situation where one of those was not correct. But again, the most common form of misgendering has to do with pronouns. So if my pronouns are they, them, and someone uses a pronoun like he or she, they are misgendering me. And the thing is, I know a lot of the time it's accidental. People don't generally look at someone and see them as non-binary. They usually look at someone and see them as one of the two presented options. Most of the time, it's an accident. There is such a thing as purposeful, harmful misgendering that goes out of the way to be hurtful towards people, but today we're not talking about that. And I just want to point out really quickly that I realize that using the wrong pronoun is not something that only happens with trans people or people with a visibly ambiguous gender. I am subscribed to several channels on YouTube that talk about Game of Thrones, and I have noticed recently that in a podcast type environment while I'm listening, people will use the wrong pronouns for characters in a show and not notice, and the other person in the conversation doesn't even point it out because we understand that it was a little tiny mistake. We know who you're actually talking about. With cis people, it doesn't have to be that big of a deal. It's just usually just a mix-up in the brain, and it happens. With trans people, obviously, you have the added thing where it is a hurtful thing, it's an invalidating thing. While this may be a mistake that you make normally anyway, with cis people, it is usually appropriate to be a little bit more mindful of the way that you speak about people who have an active gender journey in which they are uncomfortable distinctly with a certain set of pronouns, usually the ones that are identified with their assigned gender. Essentially, I'm saying I understand that this is not just an issue about trans people and people get things wired in their brain weird, and it's not just because, oh, I see you as this, therefore I'm calling you this. Frequently, it can just be a slip of the tongue. The basic guideline that you should follow if you accidentally misgender someone, and I will provide some examples in a second, but the basic guideline is that you should acknowledge your mistake, correct yourself, apologize, and move on. I suppose that sounds like a lot of steps, but really what this breaks down to is if I am talking about my friend who came out as a gender, but I'm used to using the pronoun she for that person, if I go, oh yeah, my friend, she, they, my mistake, and just continue with your sentence after the fact. If you're meeting someone for the first time and you use the incorrect pronoun for them and they correct you, just go like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, and move on. It is not that big of a deal. If it's something formal or semi-formal, like you're doing a live stream or you're doing a impromptu interview with someone and you happen to use the wrong pronoun, that's okay. You'll generally want to match the formality of your apology to the situation that you're in. So if you're in a casual environment, just go like, oh shoot, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that, and then move on. If you're in a professional or semi-professional environment, you may want to be a little bit more formal and say, my apologies, I meant this, and then continue speaking with your question or whatever it was. The point is here, there are ways that you can very briefly acknowledge that you've made a mistake and then move on from it quickly so that you don't put a bunch of focus and attention on the mistake that you've made and therefore create more confusion and hubbub. This guidance may seem fairly cut and dry and fairly easy, but there are a lot of ways in which people will respond to being corrected on a misgendering in a way that actively makes the situation worse. So I suppose now I will share some examples of ways that you absolutely should not respond to being corrected on a misgendering, or how you should not respond when you realize you've misgendered someone. If you misgender someone and either you notice that you've done it or they correct you on it, do not make a huge deal about the fact that you feel bad about what you've said incorrectly. I have occasionally had people go on for several minutes just like, oh, I feel so bad. Oh, I feel so bad. Please do not do that, because the thing that you're doing there is you've made a hurtful mistake, and it was not intentional probably, but you then, by making yourself out to be like, oh no, I feel so bad, I'm such a bad person for making this mistake, you are then causing me to have to perform the emotional labor of making you feel better about you hurting my feelings. The longer you draw out the correction and apology part of this, the more you're making it uncomfortable for the trans person who you've misgendered. If you misgender someone who you've never met before and they correct you on it, absolutely do not take that as an opportunity to ask them questions about their gender or whether they're trans. That is not the time to do this. If someone wants to have a conversation with you about their trans identity or about their transition, that is up to them to bring up to you. It is never a cis person's place to ask a person invasive questions about their identity, especially in a very casual situation like, for example, me while I am at work dealing with the public. If I correct someone on the way that they've gendered me, that is not the time for them to ask me, oh, like, are you trans? Like, you need to explain to me why I should use these pronouns. That is not the situation in which you should do that. You should merely accept the correction and move on. Do not take that as a moment to challenge the person on their assertion of their gender. I am a gender ambiguous person who is in the public and interacts with the public. I know what I look like. I know that a certain amount of misgendering is going to happen because I inhabit a fairly androgynous space with the way that I look. It is to be expected to a certain degree for most of us, but that doesn't mean that it should be a big deal and an imposition on us every day as we try to defend our identity and have it be seen as valid by other people. And if it's a situation in which you know the trans person, we are usually going to be more understanding for our friends and family who are making a clear show that they're making an effort to adjust along with us. If you really care about a trans person in your life or about trans people in general, then my best advice for you, if you accidentally misgender someone, is to apologize and move on, correct yourself, and try to do better in the future. The fact that someone has tried to correct you means that they think that you can do better. Trust me, we don't waste time correcting people who we think are going to cause resistance and push back on us. It's only the people who we care about enough to have a continued relationship with. I know for me personally, if I feel like I am going to have a struggle with someone getting them to use the right pronouns and address me the right way, I'm more likely to just stop talking to that person than to make the effort to correct them and bring them around to where I am. So please take it as a sign of our faith in you. If we bother to correct you, it's because we think that you matter to us enough to change that, and we think that we matter to you enough that you would make the effort to change that. Again, just acknowledge that you've made a mistake, apologize, correct yourself by inserting the correct word in that context, and then just keep talking. You don't have to let the conversation become about the fact that you've just misgendered someone. We don't want that to be the only thing that we ever talk about and the only conversations that are ever happening around us. We just want to be acknowledged as people, as our true gender, and then go from there and live our lives. I hope that this has helped provide some clarity on how you can interact with this situation. I didn't have as many examples as I might have liked, but I hope that just the general explanation worked well. Keep it brief. Do not make a big deal out of it. Do not martyr yourself because, oh, I'm so terrible. Don't do that. Just move on and let everybody live their happy, happy lives. That's all from me today, though. If you like this video, please give me pretty analytics to look at and comments to read. Find me on Patreon, subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications, and I really hope that you have an okay day. Bye. I'd like to thank my patrons for supporting this educational work, especially The Gay Agenda, Amber Music, David Walter, Jenny Swindles, Elijah Lane, Jess Zendrex, Gretchen Becker, Wellington Marcus, Nicolette Klassen, Pine Snake, and Mr. Atheist.